Welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA. I'm CJ Hunter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brandemar, the sergeant at arms.
And today joining us, we're very excited to have Anthony D'Esposito. Thanks for coming on, Ant.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Anthony wears many hats. This is a guy who's had a storied career, a life of public service going back to when you were a teenager. Right. So Anthony started off in a local fire department, then became a New York City cop, councilman, congressman. Now you're a nominee for Inspector General, Department of Labor, a Trump nominee. So you've had quite the career and life already.
Yeah, and a lot of it is really focused on public service and like you said, public safety. I born and raised in Island Park down in the South Shore of Long Island in Nassau County, and as you guys know, most of the fire service here on Long Island is volunteer. So I joined it at a young age, and actually this coming week I'll be receiving my 25-year award for being a member for 25 years. I served as chief there from 09 to 16, and was the incident commander during Hurricane Sandy, and joined the police department. Got promoted pretty quick, and every day I miss being a member of the NYPD, but really have had the opportunity to do some different things and utilize, I think, my base, the idea that I believe in elected service in government. Really, your fundamentals is keeping people safe, and it's different the way you look at it. But after the NYPD, I became a councilman in the town of Hempstead, which is the largest town in the United States of America, bigger than by population, bigger than 7 states. So operated a budget of about $600 million, 3,000 full-time employees, 1,200 miles of roadway. So it was a pretty big job. And then had the opportunity to run for Congress and become a member of Congress in 2023. I served with, Suffolk's own Andrew Garbarino and Nick Lalota, two of my best friends. But getting back to, and I think what's such a strong focus of today and all the work that you guys do, is I really truly believe that elected office and being an elected official in government, if you're doing it for the right reasons, really your foundation should be public safety. And there's a few ways to look at that. It's, when you're in Congress, obviously public safety is about keeping the nation safe, right? And securing our homeland and making sure that federal law enforcement professionals have the resources that they need to do their job and get home safe to their family. When you're on a local level, it's to make sure that the local police departments and law enforcement professionals have everything that they need. But then even more hyper local, like when you're doing it on a town or a village level, it's still about public safety, right? It's about making sure that your streets are paved. Why? So people don't get hurt and people aren't getting in car accidents. Making sure that your roads are paved when it snows. Why? So people don't get hurt. You want to make sure that your parks are clean and make sure that people have what they need. Why? Because you want kids to have a place to go to at night and during the day, so they're not out on the streets causing trouble and getting into riffraff. So I think, I say it all the time. I wish that and hope that more people that are grounded in law enforcement, more people who have spent a career like I have in the police department, in the NYPD, has served as a cop, a detective, or other ranks, would get involved in government and politics, because it just enables you to really be ahead of so many things. It enables you to really cut through the bullshit and see people for what they are and realize, listen, we want to get to A to B and we want to do it in the most efficient way possible. And it gives you the ability, I think, as cops, we're problem solvers, right? You get a 911 call, and whether it's a car accident, whether it's a murder, whether it's a DV call, or anything in between, our purpose is to solve a problem. And really, in elected office, that should be your purpose, to solve the problems that your constituents, when they go home at night and they sit around the dinner table, or when you go to bed at night, those things that keep you up and concern you about your family, those should be the solutions that to the problems that we find.
Yeah. And, you bring up public safety too, and how being a police officer and former fire chief gives you a good groundwork and understanding of how things work in the real world. when you look at any political polling, public safety is always one of the top 3 issues. Very often number 1, but pretty much everybody, at least locally and pretty much across America, looks at public safety as a top 3 issue.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's the issue that matters most. And I will tell you that looking at polls most of my adult life, I mean, when you look at polls, they generally say the same thing, right? I mean, whether you're in a time like we are now, or whether you rewind back in, the beginning of cashless bail and criminal justice reform, people still want to be safe. The difference is how inspired they are to come to the polls to affect that change, to actually be safe. And I think that is the job that, we all have to do. And I say we because we work together collaboratively to get our messages across and to make sure that, those people who are polled, who are saying, yeah, public safety is my number one concern, or taxes or cost of living are my number one concern. Well, if those are your concerns, then you have to come out and vote for the right people in order to make sure that those things are protected. And, I truly am thankful for the work that, both Suffolk and Nassau County PBAs do to help affect those change. It's never about partisan politics. It's about the people who do the right thing for public safety and for the members. And I think that we've seen when it comes to, you talked about polls and, public safety, but people are smart, especially here on Long Island. They realize that good quality public safety is not cheap. And they're willing, even though cost of living is one of the most important things that they're concerned about, they're willing to pay more to live in a place on Long Island because they know they are being kept safe by some of the finest professionals anywhere in this country. So they work hand in hand. Cost of living and keeping our community safe are important. But when you're putting out a good product like the Suffolk County, like the Nassau County Police Departments do, people don't mind paying for it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring up how involved the Suffolk PBA and Nassau PBA are, because we don't just stop at the work we do out on the street. We want to get messaging out that's pro public safety so that the voters out there can make educated votes when they get to the ballot box. And that's why we started this podcast. And that's why we have guys like you come on. Yeah. And it's not party-based issues. We talk about issues that affect public safety and real life Americans. And we do everything we do based on candidates and issues. That's why we've had people from both sides of the aisle on here. And that's why we were excited to have you on, a guy who's made your whole career on public safety.
And I appreciate it. And I think that, this platform, this media platform is super important. I think that, we've talked about that, so many of our younger voters, this is how they get their news and information, right? There's less and less people watching Fox News, thankfully less people watching CNN and MSNBC, but less people watching MSNBC, Fox News and the mainstream media for many reasons. They feel like it's not the truthful media that they should be reporting on. They feel like there's a spin. It's one of the reasons why, outlets like Newsmax have seen such an increase in viewership, because people, especially the 18 to 35-year-olds, feel like it's news that's being presented in a way that's not, gauging it one way or another. And I think that's something that, podcasts have the ability to do. I mean, look at in the last presidential election, because of his son Barron, President Trump embraced podcasts, whether it was going on Joe Rogan, whether it was J.D. Vance talking to Tim Dillon, who, by the way, is from Island Park, where I'm from. So that's a shout out to Tim Dillon. They embraced this form of media. And I think that it is awesome that you guys have done it as well. Because like you said, it's not just the work that you do on the streets. It's not just the work that you do when someone calls 911. It's not just the work that you do, patrolling the streets of Suffolk County. Very often, obviously, that is the most important. But this work is also important, because the future, and I'm not, trying to sound dramatic, but it's true. The future of Long Island, the future of Suffolk County, the future of Nassau County depends on us getting the right message out. And I've always said, I'm happy to work with anyone from any party. I mean, I spent most of my career in the NYPD was in a team-based atmosphere. Guys and girls from different economic backgrounds, different political ideologies, different color skin, different religions. But when we jumped out of that car, my life depended on them and their life depended on me. And so I'm willing to work with anyone, everywhere, anywhere. But it is important for us to get that message across. And it's important for us to highlight and call out those who try to play this game of bipartisanship, but when they have the opportunity to actually be bipartisan, they hide in the corner, because that's not bipartisanship. That's just bullshitting the people who you're trying to get votes from. I mean, when we have an opportunity, you talk about the last congressional elections on Long Island. Myself and Garbarino and Lalotta, we have always been staunch defenders of our border. Last Congress, we all sat on the Homeland Security Committee. We helped to impeach Secretary Mayorkas because we feel that he allowed our country to be invaded by nearly 15 million illegal migrants. We worked to pass H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act, which was by far and away the most comprehensive border security bill that this country has seen in decades. And now we have members of Congress who represent, parts of Nassau, both on the South and North Shore, who claim to be bipartisan. But, just a few weeks ago, they put on the floor the SAVE Act, which simply said, if you want to vote in in a national election, you want to vote in an election here in America, you have to be an American citizen. Seems pretty
common sense.
Seems pretty common sense, but they both voted against it. They put migrants ahead of law-abiding citizens. So when they say, we want to be bipartisan, when they say they want to secure the border, you actually have to put your voting card where your mouth is. You can't just want to support police when you go to a parade and take a picture with them for your social media. You have to stand with law enforcement in the good and the bad. And that's one of the things that I've always tried to push. I mean, there's very few things that make me more insane than seeing people who supported cashless bail, who supported criminal justice reform, but then show up to parades and they want to take a picture with guys and girls in uniform. What do you want to take a picture for?
And cops see through that too. We expect people to walk the talk, right? We don't want to see something that's disingenuous where, like you put it, 5-6 years ago, they're supporting defund the police or cashless bail. Right. And now all of a sudden they're changing their tune. They're saying, oh no, we support the police.
Exactly.
The police need the tools to keep everybody safe. When they're part of the problem that took it away from us.
You're more than welcome to hate us. Just own it.
Right.
If you don't like cops and you don't like first responders, just own it. It's fine. But don't try to change your decision now based on the fact of polls. If you're going to gauge your political career on polls, you're just so disconnected from the people that you serve, and you are so full of shit. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I really do think that people are getting smarter, and I shouldn't say smarter, they're paying attention more. And they're paying attention more because of opportunities just like this, because they're able to get news. They're able to get real life cut through the nonsense news on podcasts, on different media markets that enable them to make the right choice for who they want.
Right. Not just getting the mainstream media spin that's just always going to make them look good. This is just a candid conversation between a couple guys. And we, like I said earlier, we have bipartisan people on this podcast. We have people from the Democratic side, Republican side. We'll have conservatives on. So we get all different points of view. It's not just always going to be preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
And being able to have conversations like this will keep everybody open-minded to try to problem solve and really get to root causes of issues.
Absolutely.
That messaging you're talking about is insulting to the good men and women that work hard every day in the streets. So I appreciate that you bring that up, because there are people that lie about their stance on law enforcement. They just go wherever the wind takes them.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't, like I said, you can't have, I mean, listen, we saw it in Nassau County. I think one of the clearest examples of this was, in 2021, we had a district attorney election. Madeline Singas, who was our district attorney, was elevated to the appeals court by Governor Cuomo. And our State Senator Todd Kaminsky decided to run for DA. At the time, he was, the self-proclaimed dean of the Long Island delegation. He had sights to be the next governor. I mean, if you would have asked him, he probably said he would have been president of the United States one day. He had $3 million in the bank. And we had to find a DA candidate very quickly. And our chairman, Joe Cairo, and a bunch of us got together. We talked to union leaders like John Wighouse, who was the president of the DAI at the time. We talked to Commissioner Patty Ryder, and, we found a 30-year prosecutor who, outside of her house with her kids and her husband and her office, not many people, really nobody knew who she was, but she was a crime fighter. She was someone who was well respected amongst the ranks of the police department. She's someone who prosecuted cases. She gave her life to putting bad people behind bars, holding them accountable, and giving victims the right to feel that the criminal was held accountable. And we went into that race in a county, as you guys know, Nassau County. There's about 130,000 more Democrats than Republicans in Nassau County, and throughout that campaign, we were outspent. We were, obviously he was on TV a lot more, but because of exactly what we're talking about, people saw through the nonsense. And this was a guy who went from being lauded for putting pen to paper in writing criminal justice reform and cashless bail to he wants to be, the top law enforcement officer of Nassau County. And people were like, wait, didn't you just handcuff those
It's not adding
cops?
up here.
It doesn't make sense. And again, in a county where there's 120,000 more Democrats and Republicans, Annie Donnelly was elected district attorney and won by 50,000 votes. So I think that tells the story that people, and I think what's important too is that people who are now involved in these elections, and we saw it in the presidential, whether it was their support of President Trump, whether it was their support of candidates on the ballot, or whether it was their support of probably a word we used 10 times already in the last 20 minutes, is common sense, right? Again, this is not partisan, but at least over the last couple of years, the view of common sense has come from the Republican Party. And I think that's what drew out the big numbers in 2024. I mean, President Trump won Long Island. It was the first time a Republican won Long Island since 1980. My old congressional district, Joe Biden won my congressional district in 2020 by 16 and a half points. Now, Trump didn't win my congressional district in 24, but Kamala only won it by 1.5 points. I mean, that's a 15-point swing.
That's a big swing.
4 years.
Yeah.
I would like to say a lot of it had to do with the work that we did, and I believe it did. I think that getting our message, building our brand, that all helped. But there is no question that it's that common sense voter. It's the person who is driving home from work and gets a message that, the Suffolk County Police has a podcast and wants to listen to people and says, you know what, I'm an independent or I'm a moderate Democrat, but, that guy D'Esposito, that guy Garbarino, that guy LaLota, I'm going to support them because they seem like they're fighting for the right things. And that's really what it's about. It's about getting the message out and humanizing those who are representing us. And I think that's something that whether you love him or hate him, that's something that President Trump has done tremendously well. He humanizes the office of the president. The fact that everywhere he goes, every time he gets on and off of Air Force One, if you meet him at his golf course for lunch, he's a guy that you can talk to. He is a guy that, doesn't always say things perfectly, but he says it how any human would say it. Like if we were talking in a podcast
right, just speaking
now,
from the heart.
Speaking from the heart, because that's what Americans want to see. They don't want to see a scripted elected official, a scripted politician, because that's why politicians have for so long gotten the bad rap, because they're scripted.
Right.
And
people want to hear
robots.
genuine thoughts and feelings. Genuine thoughts and feelings and concerns for the people that they represent.
Right.
He's not politically correct. And I think that a lot of people can appreciate that about him, whether you like him, whether you love him, or whether you hate him. He just says whatever's on his mind.
Yeah.
And you can rest assured that he's going to follow through with whatever he's saying. And I think that the messaging is clear about that.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, again, getting back to, using different media, I think the huge help that he had in changing the numbers of the 20 to 30 year olds was utilizing, media just like this and getting out there and talking to Joe Rogan, going to these UFC events, not because he thinks it's a good campaign stop, because he genuinely loves going to, going to UFC.
Right. Like you said, humanizing himself and the office.
I think that's so important what he did too, especially reaching out to those younger demographics, because we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, those younger people have really sided with the Democrats. I don't know if it's a college-based thing. Kids come out of college and they go in that direction. I feel like a lot of times you see them kind of swerve back to the Republican base at a certain point in their lives when they're working their job.
And I think what's important too, and something that I know that I've worked hard to overcome, and I know again working with Nick LaLotta and Andrew Garbarino, same thing, is that there's so many. There's a few demographics that I think Democrats take for granted. One of them for a long time was the youth. They just thought that was a built-in base. We don't have to focus on them because they're coming our way. Another demographic is African Americans and minorities. Democrats consistently feel that they could just count that demographic in their corner. And I think we've seen over the last few years that that's not really the case. Why? Because they don't want to be ignored. The very decisions that Democrats are making are affecting their communities the most. I mean, I use cashless bail, criminal justice reform. I spent my entire career in Brownsville, Brooklyn. It's probably one of the most violent square miles. I would argue top 10 most violent square miles in the country. But there are good people that live there. And when Andrew Cuomo and when Kathy Hochul and when the Democrats in the state legislature tried to articulate to them that cashless bail and criminal justice reform was to their benefit, it was so that they were, getting rid of this revolving door of justice. Well, it didn't do that. All it did was make the communities that they live in even more dangerous, because it became a even bigger revolving door of justice where people were arrested, then released, and then able to go out and commit more crimes. And when you go and actually speak to them, which is what the Democrats don't do, they say, we're fed up. I don't want to, a nice old woman, she doesn't want to go to the corner bodega to get a quart of milk and worry about getting clipped or getting into the lobby of her building and have everyone hustling drugs in the lobby. That's not what they want. And by doing this, the Democrats thought that this was it was almost like a campaign buy, they went in on cashless bail and criminal justice reform because that's what would provide them the votes. It was total nonsense. Yeah. All it did was create a bigger divide amongst the minorities who now don't support the Democrats because they left them out to dry. I mean, we talk about it all the time, and like you said, historically, you take the young people, you take, and they try with different gimmicks. Oh, we're gonna get rid of all your college loans. It's failed every time. You talk about, again, the minority communities, they feel abandoned, they feel ignored. And again, we now have, we have elected officials. We have a president who is focused on those communities, who wants to rebuild them, who wants to invest in infrastructure, who wants to invest in law enforcement and public safety so that their communities are safer, who have every day. I mean, I don't think there's a day in the last 5 years that I haven't talked about repealing parts of criminal justice reform. It's what we're fighting for. I mean, and now you have over the last couple of days, because of her complete ineptness. I mean, we're now a month and a half late on a budget, but now Kathy Hochul wants to take a victory lap because she thinks that she's, adding stuff into the discovery laws, and she's celebrating it with Alvin Bragg. I mean, I've never seen, it's like lighting a house on fire and then showing up with a bucket with holes in it and trying to say, I'm putting the fire out.
Exactly. Well, on the fire that they created and started.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the revolving door of justice has never been spinning faster, right? Like you put it, these guys commit a crime, they get locked up, they get right back out the next day. And we've seen this rise in recidivism because the penalties aren't fitting the crimes. And we've seen some of these recidivists go out and commit very serious crimes. Like look at Jonathan Diller, the murder of Jonathan Diller, New York City police officer. The guy that pulled the trigger in that case had 14 prior arrests. Yeah. The other guy in the car with him had 20 prior arrests. These guys are, they can't adjust to a normal lifestyle outside, right? They've already been proven to be unrehabable, right? That there has to be penalties that fit crimes. People need to be kept in correctional facilities longer to be a deterrent to not go out and live this life of crime.
Yeah.
And right now, those penalties don't exist.
I mean, jails were built for a reason, right?
Right.
We have correction officers for a reason. And the other thing, which I think sometimes we talk about the recidivism. We talk about the fact that people are, getting released before the paperwork is done. We talk about the fact that you have individuals like the ones in the Diller case who combined, I mean, I think everyone in that car combined had close to 30 prior arrests. I mean, that's absolutely insane that they're still walking the streets, and gave them the ability to pull a trigger on an innocent NYPD cop, a father of a toddler, really because he wore the uniform, right? And you think about all of us. I mean, I don't know, combined, we probably have close to 40 years, right, on the job, I would assume, that 30 years on the job. And you think about every funeral that you've gone to, and you have the widow or the widower saying, with the exception of like 9/11 stuff, but those who were killed by, stabbing or gunshot, I mean, things need to change. Things need to change. When we went to the Ramos and Lou funerals, things need to change. When we went to Timoshenko, I mean, it goes on and on. And here we are again in 2024, and we're hearing the same concerns. Like, I mean, Stephanie Diller couldn't have made it any clearer. She looked into the eyes of the elected officials who, again, caused you could say it however you want. When people say, and they get all offended, oh my God, they said, they have blood on their hands. You do have blood on your hands. You not only drafted the legislation, you voted for the legislation, and then you doubled down and said it was a good idea and it was making communities safer, when every single community has said with factual evidence, you are full of shit. It is not making our community safer. And I think, to the point that you were making of people, the revolving door of justice, I think what else is so important is the actual feeling from criminals that they'll never be held accountable, that they can do whatever they want. And that is almost more dangerous than just releasing them. They feel that they can do anything they want because justice is not going to find them. And I think that is really the narrative that needs to be changed, because if we want to create safe streets, it's not just about crime stats. Safe streets equates to perception. When our families go to visit Midtown Manhattan and they get off the train at Penn Station, they shouldn't be afraid to get on the subway to go to Midtown. But yet they are. So they'll come up and they'll walk, or they'll take a cab, or something that I've seen, I mean, especially campaigning on the railroad station. I mean, the amount of people who get on the Long Island Railroad every day with a motorized scooter. And why? Because they don't want to take the subway. And it may not be, they may ride in a subway car that never had a problem, but it's how they feel. They don't want to travel to work every single day. They don't want to travel to school every day in fear, looking over their back, wondering, there's a guy over there, he keeps adjusting his waistband. What has he got on him? Nobody wants to live like that. Right. And the only way to change that is to start holding these criminals accountable. It's to start making sure that we never elect a rogue DA like Alvin Bragg again, that we don't have attorneys general like Tish James, who make it a point to want to go after cops just because they are cops. I mean, that's not justice.
Right. And, you brought up the Timoshenko killing and Lou and Ramos. So I remember I started most of my career in New York City, too. And Timoshenko's killing was the first murder of a police officer that occurred while I was out on the street. And I'll remember that for the rest of my life, because it was like a light bulb went off. Like you're fresh out of the academy, you're out on the street for about a week, and then you hear about a cop just a few miles away getting shot and killed. Yeah. And it was like a light bulb went off, like, holy shit, this is for real. Right. And then it seemed like the local politicians in the city and New York State kept making our job more difficult as my career went on. And eventually we got to the point where when Lou and Ramos were assassinated, I was actually on that crime scene. I was supposed to work a anti-protest detail that day. But while we were mustering up and getting all our posts, the assassination occurred. And we all just got mobilized to Brooklyn. They were, get to Brooklyn, we'll figure out where we're going to post you. And I ended up being on that crime scene. And I remember every cop in the city feeling like the local government has just betrayed us. And the national government too, the national narratives, all the anti-police rhetoric that was out there, all the grandstanding that went on. And it got to a point where when we were at those funerals, standing for those officers, honoring their sacrifice, when Bill de Blasio got up and spoke, we all turned our backs on him.
Well, it started in the hospital.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
So it was the middle of December 17th or 18th. I was working in the 7-3 squad. And I remember we always kept the radio on borough-wide, and I remember the radio transmission come over. And it, like you said, Timoshenko actually was in the same academy class as me. And I remember the night he was killed. But it's all those things. I mean, those are radio transmissions that you never forget, right? Mm-hmm. They are seared into your brain. And I remember the days following the Ramos and Lou assassination. And like you mentioned it, but there was this never before felt eeriness about the city of New York. I remember, getting dressed to go out on the street, and there was this weird silence amongst a city that was always so loud and boisterous and horns honking. It was almost like you walked out into some of the busiest streets in New York City, and while that was still happening in the ears and the eyes of so many cops, it was like silence. Because all you could focus on, you were waiting for that next shoe to drop. There was just so much tension. There was so much anger. There was so much unrest and hostility in the city of New York. And again, that was a situation where, Bill de Blasio, and again, this isn't partisan, but he just doubled down. And instead of, you would think any sane person would have went home that night in December and looked at himself in the mirror and said, what is happening?
Right.
I just had 2 cops assassinated on a street corner in a relatively, if you take all the Brooklyn precincts, in a relatively safer Brooklyn precinct, right, in the 8-4.
And for no reason other than the uniform they were wearing.
What's happening? But he didn't do that. He just kept turning the same back that we turned on him. He turned it right back to us. And at no point did he say to the radical city council, we need to stand up against the calls to defund the police. At no point was he somebody, he's the poster child of someone who should have, when they were debating criminal justice reform in Albany, if I was the mayor, I would have been up there every day and say, guys, listen, I believed in this before. Right. Let me tell you what I experienced.
Acknowledge a mistake.
2 of my cops were assassinated in broad daylight in a busy Brooklyn street simply because they wore a shield on their chest and they were in a car that was blue and white. Think about that. And the fact that we continue to have elected officials who don't see that. And now it's 10 years. Or longer. It's insane the amount of time has passed, and we're still fighting the same battles. We still have individuals like Bill de Blasio. Now we have Kathy Hochul, who, again, like we said a few minutes ago, she's now celebrating this disastrous budget she puts together that, was added in some more protections for discovery. And she's sitting here celebrating it with some of the most cop-hating rogue district attorneys in the entire state of New York. It's it baffles my brain.
If our cops are going to get ambushed, what's stopping the regular citizen from being ambushed? Yeah. And they don't have any weapons to protect themselves. I think, like you said, public safety is really fundamental with good governance. And over the past 10 years or so, we really wound up turning our back on public safety.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why, in Congress, I put forth a bill, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, and we made it through the House, and of course it was a dead end in the Senate because, like many of the good legislation that was passed, and some of it bipartisan, Chuck Schumer shelved it because he didn't want to give any of the Republicans a win. But
isn't that crazy? Like giving the opposing party a win was more important than just doing something that's common sense that will help protect everybody. Because when cops are more comfortable doing their jobs, it's going to protect the public.
It's funny because I just had this conversation yesterday with a CNN reporter. We've spent a lot of time talking about public safety, but there are so many things that we worked on that had nothing, they had to do with public safety, but not law enforcement related. For example, everything that's happening right now, and I'll make this quick, but it's a perfect example. Everything that's happening right now with the whole Newark thing, with the air traffic controllers. And so the TRACON 90 facility, which is the air traffic control facility that handles really a lot of the East Coast, it was in my district, not far from Roosevelt Field Mall. And they had a proposal to move that facility and a lot of its staff to a TRACON facility in Philadelphia. Now, there were many reasons as to why I was fighting it. And again, I joined forces. And this was something that was actually bipartisan. I worked with Lolota, Garbarino, even Swazi got involved at the end. And we said, listen, this isn't about personal stories. It's not about the air traffic. It's not just about the air traffic controller whose kid has special needs and their treatment is here. And obviously moving to Philadelphia will be a mess. It's not just about the family who, they lost someone who they loved in 9/11, and now the only remaining family is this air traffic controller leaving the community and leaving his mom there would be terrible. It's not just about, the air traffic controllers who don't have the ability to pack up all their stuff and go to new schools. And it's not just about that. It's about the fact that the infrastructure is not in place to transmit this critical information from the TRACON 90 facility in Garden City all the way to Philadelphia. It needs new infrastructure. It needs updated cables. It needs updated computer software. There was the bipartisan infrastructure bill was over $1 trillion. Less than 1% of it was spent on air traffic control. And now we were able to include in the FAA reauthorization bill last year the fixes to the TRACON. It kept the guys in place. It made sure that there was no staffing issues. Everyone was happy. It went over to the Senate, and Chuck Schumer took it out of the FAA reauthorization in the Senate portion of the bill. Why? Because he didn't want to have a win for people like me and Garbarino and Lolota.
That's incredible.
I mean, so when you're talking about, so it's not just about cops. It's really just, it's this political warfare that, quite frankly, it's what people are sick of. It really is. It's what turns people off. And I mean, here you had an issue where you actually had Democrats and Republicans working together, and it was still pulled because they wanted to make sure the Republicans, or look at the 9/11 healthcare funding. I mean, we've been fighting for that for years. We had literally at the end of the last Congress, I mean, we had the UFA, we had the PBA, everyone was in DC. We're celebrating fully funding the 9/11 healthcare bill till, I think it was 2099.
Yeah.
And look, do I think that a lot of the work that he's done has been helpful, but I don't believe that a tweet from Elon Musk is what should have sank that bill. Mm-hmm. And, I support the work of Doge. I support making our government more efficient and rooting out, wasteful spending. But this wasn't a pet project. This was something that affects now, you rewind back to Peter King's days, and he used to argue about the 9/11 healthcare. And, that people used to say, all right, well, but that's a Northeast issue. It's a New York, New Jersey, Connecticut issue. It's not. Right now, there are people suffering from 9/11 cancer or 9/11 related illness in every congressional district in the United States of America. It's not a Northeast issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's a United States of America issue. And it's one that we should have fixed at the end of last Congress, but because of a tweet, it got pulled. I mean, that's the stuff in government and politics that turns people off and makes them say, I don't care who my elected official is. It's why I'm not voting, because none of it matters. And it's why we have to do things like this to let them know that it does matter. Right. There is a fight left in people. There is the willingness of people to work on both sides of the aisle. There is an opportunity for people to have that humility and say, yeah, I screwed that one up, or yeah, I should have done it this way, or yes, I'm willing to work with this person to achieve this goal. And then there's going to be other issues where, yeah, we completely stand the line and we're not going to cross it, and we're not going to help one another. But I think public safety should be one of those ones where, and like,
it's a no-brainer.
Like we started off with, I mean, public safety really is the root of public service.
Right. Back to that Bill of Rights you were talking about, though, like some of the things that were included in that, because I don't think the public really knows what a police Bill of Rights would entail.
Yeah, I mean, it would give them the opportunity to defend themselves. It would make sure that they are represented in a court of law. You know, we have to remember that law enforcement throughout this country is very different in many different places. We are blessed here in Nassau and Suffolk County. You know, and I say we as law enforcement, you know, we fight with elected officials to get funding. We fight, but relatively speaking, we have the right equipment. We have the right facilities. We have the right training. There are police departments, and many of which I'm sure we've discussed in the past. I mean, there are police departments, even in some really rural places, just like upstate New York, but throughout this country, who, you know, you go to work as a cop and you can't go out in your patrol car till your relief comes in because you guys share the same bulletproof vest. I mean,
that's crazy.
It is. It's crazy, but it's real. And it's real across the United States of America. It's real that I've visited communities. Take the border communities along the southern border, where you walk into a jail and the sheriff, you know, is not even in uniform because they don't provide him a uniform. He's in, you know, jeans and a golf shirt.
Yeah, I see that on TV all the time.
It's real. And, you know, you have makeshift jails being built because they don't have the ability to keep, you know, the facilities up and running. I mean, you have places where cops and correctional facilities are placed in communities where the median income is $25,000. I mean, these people are living in poverty. So I guess my point is that while I think many people in places like New York, because you think about the NYPD, they're recognized throughout the world, right? You think about here on Long Island, but so the law enforcement Bill of Rights may not be something that we would see as truly beneficial to us here. We kind of have our rights. We have union protection. We have people fighting for us. But in a lot of places, you don't. You don't have the ability to be protected if God forbid you're arrested, you arrest someone, or you try to effect arrest and you're sued. You don't have places where you can speak out because you're concerned about your wages and the safety of your working conditions. You don't have places where, listen, perfect example, and I am the victim of this. I mean, look at in the 2024 congressional campaign against me, the Democratic Party spent $32 million against me. $32 million. Most of that money spent was targeting my police career. Now, I had a great career. I retired with over 700 arrests, most of them felonies. I dismantled gangs. I took hundreds of illegal firearms off the street. And probably in the course of that entire time, I had maybe 3 or 4 complaints. Now, we all know, because in New York, and especially in New York City, anybody can make any complaint against you. And in the NYPD, CCRB, and other investigative units look into the claims of, for the most part, are perps. There are people who committed crimes, who have spent their life in and out of jails. They have spent their life getting locked up, getting released, doing time, hustling drugs. And yet we are taking complaints that these people make and we're taking them seriously. Now, I'm not saying that any complaint made by someone who's arrested, I'm not saying, and I think we all agree, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. There are plenty of bad, but when you affect over 700 arrests, when you're part of thousands of interrogations, when you're part of hundreds of search warrants, and your entire career, you take about 3 or 4 complaints and they are investigated by CCRB and they take snippets of that and literally spend $32 million to try to destroy your reputation. It didn't work because we'll be back. But my point being is that cops everywhere need a Bill of Rights. They need to be protected by that because that is total bullshit. And the fact that we allow the mainstream media and some of our left-leaning liberal rags here in the United States of America run with that same information, damn right cops need to be protected. And I think we have an opportunity this Congress. I'm hoping, that some of my old colleagues from right here in Suffolk County will take the lead with this. I know that there's going to be some conversations during Police Week, and I think that we have some additions that we can make. I think that now that common sense Republicans have the House and the Senate and the White House, I've argued this, and I'm not saying this because he's a Republican, and I'm not saying it because I appreciate what he does for law enforcement. I don't think law enforcement throughout this country has had a better friend in the Oval Office than we have with President Trump. And I mean that sincerely. I think that the moment he was elected, he didn't even need to be sworn in yet. The feeling amongst law enforcement professionals throughout this country was, we have a commander-in-chief that has our back. So I think that the law enforcement Bill of Rights, in addition to what we've already had in place, their protections and making sure that these bogus claims are not used to ruin their life. We should also have a conversation, one that's real, about police suicide and the protections of law enforcement professionals. In that, if they do have something that's bothering them, that their jobs are not going to be affected, that they have the ability to go to someone and say, I'm really battling these demons and I need to find a solution to this, that they're not going to be like, we say it all the time, and it's like one of those hashtags where I see it on social media, and like it's kind of like the never forget hashtag. You got your 9/11, you get a cop killed. Every Democrat, every politician, whether they voted against cops, but never forget. And in 3 weeks, you ask them, who was the cop that was killed 3 weeks ago? They have no fucking idea who you're talking about. But in this situation, we really need to start breaking the stigma. We need to. And I give him credit because he's really been at the forefront of this. But Tommy Shevlin in Nassau County has been, yelling from the rooftops that we need to find a solution to these problems. I mean, we've had, I don't know the exact number, but last week was that number 12 of cops killed by suicide. Just in New York. Yep. And a majority of them being in Nassau County. So we really do need to break that stigma. We need to find the ability for cops to feel comfortable. I mean, we all know you go home and you carry a very heavy burden, right? And there are so many of our haters that say, cops have a great gig. They could do 20 years, they retire. Well, most people work longer than 20 years, but that is set up because cops see, hear, and smell things that most people should never in their life. And that eventually takes a toll. And when you do that every day for 20 years, whether it's drinking more, whether it's the relationships you have with your family, whether it's the things that haunt you and keep you up at night, whether it's the things that give you night terrors, that stuff is real. And that stuff, those are things that I think, as a law enforcement family, that we have to do better. And I hope that, this law enforcement Bill of Rights, when it's reintroduced, has a portion in it for that.
Yeah, I think it would be great to have a portion of mental health in the Bill of Rights. We were just up in Albany with Tommy Shevlin, and we were at an event, and he was wearing a Stop the Stigma t-shirt, right? This has become such a hot topic, and just about every episode of On Patrol has come back to mental health at some point or another. And we have to do a better job of, like you said earlier, a lot of these cops don't seek help because they're scared of negative repercussions for seeking help, right? If you go and seek help, you risk having your guns taken away, having your ability to work overtime taken away. It becomes a compensation hit. Maybe you rely on that overtime to provide for your family, right? Especially a lot of our guys, they're family men, multiple children that play multiple sports. Sports nowadays are a lot of money. Guys rely on their overtime to be able to provide the lifestyle their kids have grown accustomed to. And we need to have something in place where, if the guy has the courage and the wherewithal to seek help, let's give him the help he needs, but not take away his ability to work and provide.
Tommy deserves a lot of credit for that, because a lot of guys don't want to go into leadership position on that point of mental health in general. Guys are always afraid to get in front of it like he has. He's really put himself out there and really been the leader on the forefront of pushing this mental health bill in New York.
Yeah. Right. And Tommy's been great too, because he's a guy who's been through it. And his story is no secret. He publicly talks about his battles with alcoholism in the past and some of the stuff he's been through when it comes to his own mental health. So I think he's a great guy to take this ball and run with it and really be that spokesperson nationally for an issue that could appear in a National Police Officers Bill of Rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you both wholeheartedly. Tommy has come through with, like you said, it's a lot of courage. It's probably not the issue that, when you're campaigning in a PBA election, it's not the one that you would normally run on. But I think, obviously from his personal experiences, Tommy was, a pioneer, so to speak. He was way ahead of his time.
Definitely.
And I know that, with everything that's happened just this year, obviously we all wish he was, we were all ahead of our time, because we probably would have been able to, avoid some of the suicides that we've seen. But nonetheless, I think that the fact that we're talking about it here, the fact that Tommy is such a leader from Nassau, I think that shows that the overall work that law enforcement unions do has evolved so much.
Absolutely.
This is not just about anymore making sure that, cops are represented, that that they're getting fair wages, that they're not getting abused, so to speak, by the hierarchy, and this has come to, like, when we say that we are a family, like, this is the epitome of that, because dealing with mental health is most of the time things that are dealt with around a kitchen table. It's the things that are dealt with by a family. And I think that the fact that here on Long Island, and, I think the NYPD is trying to do a pretty good job of it as well. Mm-hmm. But having such a strong, staunch voice like Tommy Shevlin leading the way, I think that really shows the evolution of what law enforcement unions have become, and not because they want to, because they need to.
Oh, we definitely need to. In Suffolk County, we had 4 law enforcement officers take their lives last year. 2 of them were out of Tanner's precinct.
Yeah.
It was tough. It's still it's tough seeing that those guys were. I knew both those guys, and one of them wound up committing suicide in the precinct, and it's hard to go down to where that happened. It's difficult.
Right, and that's something that every cop that works there has to live with every time they go into the locker room.
Right. And it becomes like, we talked about the revolving door of justice, but similarly, it becomes a revolving door, because now you have cops who, like you said, were down in the locker room or passed by his locker, and they constantly think about it. But yet they too are concerned about opening up their mouth or saying something, because, like you said, they need the overtime so that their daughter's lacrosse is paid for. They need that overtime because 2 of their kids are in college right now. I mean, those are real life concerns, and people that don't do this and don't know what this job is about often say, well, this is your pay. You guys shouldn't live your lives based on overtime. That's just not realistic. It's what cops do. And there's a reason why, getting back to, we see, smell and hear things that we shouldn't, and people could do 20 years. And there's a you're not becoming a millionaire being a cop. You're going to live a comfortable life. You're going to work your ass off. And you do it because you're guaranteed that pension so that you could take care of your family. And that pension is based on the amount of time and hours that you put in. And those hours are away from your family.
Right.
You know, you're not doing overtime sitting at your kid's lacrosse game. You're doing overtime investigating crimes. You're doing overtime, patrolling a community. You're doing overtime at a detail. That's what this is. That's the reality of this.
You're taking on more stress,
right?
Instead of, and both those guys that I knew, great guys, really great guys, and I can't say enough good things about them. It's just unfortunate. I don't want to speak for them or anybody in general what they were going through, but it was really unfortunate to watch that all play out in really like a 2-month span. It was. Yeah, you hope that guys can reach out and get help.
Right. And then you think about, every cop that thinks just like that. Like, well, could I have said something? Could I have done something? Was there something I missed? That
Everybody's Monday morning quarterbacking themselves. And, I'm hopeful that this podcast can help shine a light on that a little bit too, because I think one of the problems that's led to this mental health crisis we're facing is the way cops have been portrayed in the media the last 2 decades. And a lot of the times unjustly, right? On CNN, after the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, everybody was saying, hands up, don't shoot. When hands up, don't shoot didn't actually happen. And that cop that was involved in that case and ended up being exonerated of any wrongdoing, not guilty of murder, did what he was supposed to do to preserve his own life, couldn't even work in Missouri anymore and had to get up and move his family, relocate. That's a big hit to your mental health and the guys around you too, because every other guy that's patrolling around in Ferguson, Missouri has to worry about that risk now. Like, what am I putting my family through? Could I be the next viral story when something's taken out of context?
Yeah. I mean, look, again, we try not to make this political, but it comes down to, again, these lack of common sense laws that are put into place. I mean, think about you have cops now around New York State and in New York City who are, before they get into a confrontation with a perp, they have to think themselves through, if they have to take this person down, how are they going to take them down? Because they want to make sure that their knee is nowhere near their chest, area. I mean, it's bonkers that the people who are putting these laws in place have never, ever, ever done a day of police work. And I said this while I was, when I was sort of, and still to this day, when I debate or come out against the mess of criminal justice reform, the thing that is so idiotic is that when they wrote this, never once did they have a conversation with a guy or a girl who rode that patrol car. Never once did they have a conversation with someone who has multiple times disarmed a perp that was threatening to kill them with a gun. At no time did they speak to the law enforcement professional that has engaged in EDP or someone with a knife and has had to keep a safe distance and utilize minimal force necessary to take down that person. I mean, those conversations were never had. It was just, this is what we're going to do because when we do this community over here, they'll support us more.
Right.
I mean, think about how crazy that is.
Yeah. You're creating more rules for us when we're in a fight for our life. And these bad guys have no rules. They're just going to do whatever they can to try to get away with their crime or take our life in the process.
How about doing a ride along? Like, how many? You could certainly go to your local precinct and ask to do a ride along, get in the car with the cops and see what they do for one day. I wonder how many people in Congress or in Senate have done that. And they're trying to push laws that are anti-police and make it so much harder for our police officers to do their job.
But do it to learn what police officers do every day. Don't do it because you want to put a picture up on your Twitter account with you in a bulletproof vest. Get in that ride along and listen. Listen to the radio. Listen and watch the way that partners, engage with one another. Watch the stressful situations. Understand that decisions are made in absolute split seconds, and realize that, yes, there are bad cops out there. There's bad lawyers. There's bad accountants. There's bad politicians. There's bad doctors. There's bad sanitation. There's bad people. But a majority of law enforcement professionals go out every day. They pin their shield on their chest. They put their uniform on and they go out to do the right thing. Nobody goes out there and says, today I'm going to do A, B, and C, because we all know that no day is routine when you're a cop. And I just, to this day, it is just, it's honestly sad. It's sad what has happened to the law enforcement profession in this country. And, you know, I think one of the things that hurts me the most is I love the job, and people say all the time, oh, you must be so glad you got out of there. I mean, no, I loved every bit of the job. You know, it was every day was something new. It was a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. But when you hear, and this is probably more New York City, but when you hear, you know, people who are steeped in tradition in the NYPD, you know, their grandfather, their great grandfather, their father, all have served, and they're telling their kids and grandkids, don't you dare take that job. I mean, if that doesn't tell you the mess that has been created, and again, right. I know this, we're not here to be partisan, but the mess has been created by Democrats in New York, and across the country, and mainstream media who have vilified law enforcement before they've had their due process. And you know, it's actually interesting. And I said this on an interview last night. Over the since January 20th, all we've heard about is due process, right? Can't deport these people. They get due process. Can't do this, due process. Okay. First of all, the United States Constitution is the law of the land. These people violated the law of the land by entering the country. So they already threw the law of the land out the window when they came here, but now they want to follow the law of the land because it suits them. But similarly, I mean, you have cops who are completely put through they forget the jury. They are judged in public perception by the liberal media before they even get to a trial. Right. So that's one of the reasons as to why it ruins your life. It is completely destructive to your personal life, to your future. I mean, you know, cops don't want to, you know, the afterlife where you want to go and do something else. And now your potential employer Googles you and your first, you know, 3 pages are all stories from the New York Times, the Daily News, or Newsday kicking the shit out of you for something that at the end you were found completely exonerated from. Right. But that day when you were exonerated and they realized that it was all bullshit, you're on page 70 of the newspaper and it's about this big. And that's the problem with the world that we live in.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think, you know, a lot, you brought up border security and the illegal immigration, and you had a hand in the Border Security Act, right? I don't think people realize the amount of crime that compounds because of the lack of security at the border. Yeah. Because these people are sneaking over the border for a reason. Usually it's because they can't get in legally. We would stop them and turn them away.
Or already have.
Right. Or already have. Right. Sometimes it's people that are crossing for the second or third time because they've already been deported.
It's affecting us throughout the country. It's not just the counties at the border that are being affected by this.
This is a huge national safety issue.
I mean, when this first really started and we were all deemed, you know, we were fear mongers. And then people started to realize that, you know, when you use that term, every state's a border state, they were like, yeah, that's true. And then it was every county is a border county. And they were like, okay, that's becoming true. And so it gets smaller and smaller. Every city's a border city. And yes, it is. I mean, we whether you are a sanctuary city or not, I mean, thankfully, you know, we live on an island where, you know, sanctuary city policies have been rejected, but you're still dealing with that migrant crime. And we had in Nassau, you know, not that long ago, you had a burglary ring of individuals on the North Shore, you know, took in, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry and money. And the Nassau County Police Department hunted them down, brought them to court. The judge couldn't keep them because of bail reform and told them to walk across the street to probation and get ankle bracelets. Because even as part, as we know, of the law, law enforcement can't escort them to probation because technically they are released. So somehow, those of us who know Nassau County, the Supreme Court and probation are about 100 feet away. It's not really difficult to, find your way. But these people weren't able to find it, and they were able to get into an Uber, and they went to the airport and never to be seen again.
Right.
So when you say it's happening everywhere, it is happening everywhere. It's happening where you have, places on the city line who are mom and pop shops that people are just going and taking everything they want off the shelf. And I mean, perhaps, I did a lot of work with organized retail crime, with Home Depot and Walmart and others. We worked with the Suffolk County DA, with Ray Tierney and with Annie Donnelly, and we did some great work. But what it comes down to is a lot of these big stores, the Home Depots, the Walmarts, the bigger drugstores, the CVSs. I mean, they have the capital to turn around and say, all right, we took a $1 million loss this month. The mom and pop shops along Main Street don't have that ability. I mean, we have places in my old district, where a store owner tells me that, once a day, the same guy walks in, he goes to the prepackaged meals, he takes his meal, and he walks out the front door. Nothing we can say, nothing we can do about him. They assume he's an illegal migrant, blah, blah, blah. And to the point where they're so brazen, he came in and said, yesterday I took the steak. If you can make it a little bit more well done, I'd like it that way. I mean,
that's unbelievable. That's incredible.
This is what we're dealing with. And then you go into New York City. I mean, we've seen what's happened there. I mean, you look at the state budget. I mean, Kathy Hochul has nearly $3 billion in the budget for illegal migrants. And it's not just about stores. It's not just about law enforcement. It's our schools. You have people who serve on school boards. They serve on school boards. They don't get paid. They volunteer because they want to make their community better. And I truly believe that they try to run it like a business, right? They try to do more with less. They do as much as they can with the tax dollars that they take in. But now they have to take into consideration the 3, the 4, or in the higher cases, the 10 to 15 unaccompanied minors that are entering this school district in the middle of a year. They don't budget for that. Right. They don't budget for extra teachers who need to teach English as a second language. They don't need to teach. They don't budget for the idea that you need to provide, food and lunch and food services for this kid because they can't provide it. And it also doesn't provide for the fact that you're now taking away resources from your tax-paying residents. I mean, so this issue has become, it's not just along the border. While obviously it is way worse along the border, but we've seen people killed. We've seen people, unfortunately raped. We've seen the devastating effects of the trafficking of narcotics that has come across our southern border. That's made its way to Suffolk County and Nassau County. Absolutely. And every county throughout the country. And luckily, we have a strong front line of men and women who wear the uniform, who stand that line between good and evil. But like we mentioned a little while ago, there are many communities who don't. Look at Aurora, Colorado, who they were taking buildings over. Right. Why? Because they're either too liberal and the cops are hands off, or because the communities don't have the ability to engage and make a difference. So they just take over.
Yeah, they create their own little kingdom. Yeah. And this problem has been nationwide. Just a couple weeks ago, on Long Island, there was an MS-13 member who was arrested by the FBI because of his connection to 11 murders throughout the country. And then just a couple weeks ago, actually at this point, about a month ago, there was Border Patrol agents up in Rochester who called for an assist on a traffic stop. The Rochester police officers went over there and assisted the Border Patrol agents, cops, just like anybody else. I've assisted other agencies in the past. You're expected to help other cops. And after these Rochester cops helped the Border Patrol agents, they were hung out to dry by their local mayor, by their chief of department. They were bad-mouthed on the media. They were told that they were going to be getting disciplined for their actions of helping federal agents. And it's unbelievable because as cops, you're expected to help cops. And we've gotten to this point where, thankfully, President Trump is fighting back against these sanctuary policies. Yeah. And we were happy to see Tom Homan go up to Rochester and tell these Rochester cops that the federal government has your back. You're out there doing the right thing. And the PBA sent a few representatives. Tanner was one of them.
Yeah,
You were
I
up
was up
there
there. It was-
with these Rochester guys, standing shoulder to shoulder with them.
Like you were saying, the media was really doubling down on it too. They were asking questions to their president over there, the Locust Police Club in Rochester, and they're really doubling down on like, why didn't the cops stop? Like, what? Because they were asked to help. When a cop calls you for help, you go. When it's a dangerous situation, you go to help the cop.
Right. And this is right on the heels of a Border Patrol agent being killed on a traffic stop along the Canadian border.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you guys had representatives in Nashville for the conference where Tom Homan spoke, and we were able to connect him with some of the Rochester police that this was affected by. But, it's not just happening in places like Rochester. I mean, just the other day, within 72 hours ago, we saw unfold in Times Square the assault of NYPD cops by a bunch of, wannabe gangbangers, but they're illegal migrants. It's an offshoot of TDA. A bunch of them were collared, and they were identified in a citywide robbery pattern. And in the process, and I've heard this from multiple sources, ones that I trust with my life. The cops, were in the precinct, and ICE agents were working on something totally different, a few blocks, a mile away, came into the precinct to use the bathroom. Another conversation happened. They realized that they had these illegal migrants. So now ICE is embedded in this investigation. And instead of applauding that, after everything that we've seen the destruction in New York City. We've seen the billions of dollars wasted on this nonsense. I mean, we've gotten to the point where even the mayor, it realizes I'm going to work with this administration because whether it's he believes in it or whether it is he's looking at his political future and his survival, he says we have to do something to clean up New York City. So to the point we were making before, I give him some credit because he saw the mistakes he made and he's trying to correct course.
Right.
I'll give that to him. And I think that he is embracing it. I mean, I know, some of his administration in the police department, and I do think that they are all hands on deck. They communicate with Tom Homan regularly. They are collaboratively working together to make the city a safer place. But I mean, after this whole thing unfolded, you had the police commissioner, even after being advised by the mayor that this is what he wanted, she launched an internal investigation to see what cops notified ICE to bring them in on the investigation. I mean, it's like you take 2 steps forward, you're taking 3 steps back. It's just, I don't understand when, and I guess that's really what it comes down to is we need to, as law enforcement professionals, as unions, we really need to make sure, and we talked about the evolution of the work of a PBA. I think voicing our opinions on who should be the leader of our departments is so critically important, because I'm not saying that they need to be someone who's been a lifelong crime fighter, but they need to have common sense, and they need to realize that whatever was your thoughts were before, you're now the police commissioner. You're now the the police chief. You didn't take a test to get here. You're being appointed to this position. And your job is to keep your area of geographical employment safe. It's about affecting positive change. It's about protecting quality of life. And it's about making sure that everyone who wears the uniform has every resource they need to do their job. Like that is what you take the oath to do.
Right. It's important to have good leaders that, especially in law enforcement, that stick up for the law enforcement officers. And we've been very fortunate to have a guy like you stick up for us in Congress. I think we touched a number of topics on this podcast today. A lot of great conversations had. What's the future look like for Anthony D'Esposito? That's what we want to know. So
I've been lucky enough and blessed to have been nominated by President Trump to serve as the Inspector General to the Department of Labor, which will enable me to once again put on my my law enforcement investigative hat and really operate throughout the country in rooting out bad actors that are trying to influence any aspects of labor, whether it's work sites, whether it's labor unions, whether it's, bid rigging. It's a pretty complex department with so many opportunities. I really look forward to growing the ranks of the special agents so that we can start to conduct real quality criminal investigations on many different fronts. I think that with the changes of everything that's happening in this country, with the influx of illegal migrants, we are going to take the lead on investigating human and child trafficking, especially those being exploited to do work in shops and factories. I look forward to utilizing my relationships that I've made throughout this country in embedding special agents into local task force to make sure that the Department of Labor is well represented and that we are doing what our mission statement is, and that really is to protect the American worker. And I think that when you say you want to protect the American worker, it's pretty much every person that lives in the United States of America that is of working age. Our job is to protect them. And I'm going to make sure that every day when I take my head off my pillow and to the moment I lay my head on my pillow, that I'm going to be committed and dedicated to that in working, with the administration. And it's one of those things where it's really supposed to be an independent. You're supposed to be independent. It's apolitical, which I understand that. But I think that in the world that we live in right now, President Trump has made it very clear that he wants this to be the golden age of the American worker. We saw just last week, the job numbers are up, and he is committed and dedicated to keeping wages up. He's well respected by labor unions and not just law enforcement. We've seen, this election cycle, we saw where the Teamsters, who have historically gone Democrat in support, they did no endorsement, and a majority, I think 80% of their members took an internal vote that they support, the work of President Trump. You have the International Association of Firefighters, who again historically have supported Democrats, stayed out, but are now working hand in hand with President Trump to create safety standards for the fire service throughout the United States of America, not just career firefighters, but embedded in this. And I'm so thankful to have been a part of it, because of the leadership of Secretary Chavez DeRemer. They are going to make safety standards for volunteers and career firefighters working together because I think getting back to what we started probably over an hour ago, President Trump is committed to first responders. So, in the short term, that's where I'm headed, and I'm going to be all in. But my days on the ballot are not over. I enjoy running for office. I love the campaigning, and I love representing people. I love being the one-stop shop to people's concerns, people's needs. Tip O'Neill, who was a Speaker of the House back in the 80s from Massachusetts, always said that all politics is local. And I believe that is the case. It's the bedrock of the work that we do. It's the foundation of elected office. And I love doing it. So I know that I'll be back in some way, shape, or form, whether it be running for Congress again or another position. I have every intention of getting back on the field and making sure that I represent a constituency once again. I guess it was said by the great. He said that it's not losing. It's about getting back up and dusting yourself off. And I'm dusted off, and I look forward to get back on the field very soon.
Well, as a former police officer, former detective, former union member, I don't think there's anybody with a more qualified background to be the IG of the Department of Labor.
Thank you.
So I think that's a great pick by President Trump. I wish you luck in that. I can't wait to see you confirmed, and I look forward to having more talks with you. And I think we'll see you next week.
Yeah, police week, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, we look forward to all you accomplish in the future.
Thank you guys. And I thank you for everything that you do, not just, with the Odd Patrol podcast, but growing the opportunity for media and getting your word out about like common sense results in legislation. But more importantly, everything that, the Suffolk County Police Department does. You're on the front line of protecting, between good and evil. And you've always been there for me, and I will always be there for you. So to everybody, stay safe.
All right. Thanks,
You too.
Anthony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.